Thank you very much. I want to thank Stephen, and I want to thank the folks at the Voter Coalition for putting this together and pulling together this forum. You know, these are exciting times for us to be able to actually talk to candidates for all of the offices that we seek, whether it's governor or attorney general, and we've even got some state rep folks here, I think, that are going to be up a little bit later. My name is John Loughlin. I'm running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. Been in this race for a while. We got our paperwork filed with the FEC in April, and we've been working hard, traveling across the state, meeting Rhode Islanders. Just by way of background, I spent 26 years in the military. Retired in 2004 as a lieutenant colonel, as a reservist, and I believe in the concept of the citizen soldier, and was very excited to be part of that concept. I was mobilized twice, once in 1995 and sent to Bosnia-Herzegovina as part of the Dayton Peace Accords, and again I was mobilized to prepare soldiers for duty in Iraq. So I think national defense is one of the key issues in this race, and one of the things we absolutely need to keep our eye on the ball. We need to stop treating these terrorists as common criminals or arrogant to deal with, and we need to start having treating them as combatants. The other focus that I got involved in this race for is about Washington. It is about what's going on in Washington. And the spending in Washington, I was on the Hannity show the other night, and I said, it's like spending on steroids. We're looking at a $12 trillion deficit. And $12 trillion is going to be impossible for our children and grandchildren to ever pay back. And if we don't get spending under control in Washington now, we're going to look back on 2009 and 2010 as the boom years. Because as we heard earlier, there's just no stimulus money. The stimulus has been totally ineffective. We need to get our economy under control. We need to start growing jobs, and we need to start doing it right now. And we're going to have a very spirited discussion, I'm sure, tonight. We're going to have a lot of questions, and I'll pass this microphone off, and we'll get our next candidate up here. Thank you very much. I mean, we hear stimulus all the time, and now they're even changing the language again, because stimulus has a negative connotation. So the new $15 billion stimulus bill is called the jobs bill, because everybody wants jobs, right? So it's all about the language, and I'm glad that you see through it, and I think people in this room see through that. Let me talk a little bit about stimulus, okay? In the 1st Congressional District, if you go to recovery.gov, you'll see that we've got about $366 million in stimulus in the 1st Congressional District, and on the website it claims that we created 429.5 jobs with that. If you do a little long division, that's about $855,000 per job. Now, I would say that that figure is even low, because if you go, it's got a little interactive map, which we also paid for, and you can click on and see specific industries. You'll find a business there that got a $70,000 grant and claims to have created 20 jobs with it. 20 jobs for $70,000. How long did those jobs last? About 7 minutes? You know, I mean, it's the kind of thing that you've got to look very closely, but you're absolutely right about the language, and you're very astute to pick up on that. And we need to call it what it is. And that's one of the reasons that people like Mark and Mike and myself want to go to Congress, because we're going to call it what it is. Thank you. I think one of the keys, too, and one of the things that went wrong at Fort Hood, is that too often politicians look at the military as a grounds for social engineering. You know, it's kind of a captive force, and we can impose social engineering experiments on the military and see how they work. And political correctness, I think, probably played a tremendous role in commanders who were afraid to surface an objection about somebody because of his ethnic background. And when that happens, ladies and gentlemen, when we start using the military for social engineering experiments, we now forget the purpose that we have in military, and that's to protect and defend the United States of America. In terms of our commitments around the world, we are really spread thin. And if another front in this war opened up, in other words, if a Korean front were to open up, we would be in very dire straits to be able to fight on the Korean Peninsula and still maintain our commitments that we have in the Middle East. One of the things that we're doing, too, that's a trend now, at least in the Army side, I don't know so much on the Air Force side, is that we're drawing down a lot of the forward deployed forces. In Germany, those forces have drawn down dramatically. When I was there as a young captain in the 80s, driving through Mannheim was like driving through Pawtucket. The yard signs were all in, or the business signs were all in English. All of the other signs were in English because there were more Americans there than Germans. And it's completely changed now. My last tour in Germany, was 1996 as part of the Bosnia rotation, and it's completely changed. We've drawn that force down significantly. And as we add technology to be able to modernize, to be able to do force protection missions, you don't necessarily need forward deployed bases to do force protection. The other reason for forward deployed bases, you know, is what's called strategic deterrent. You know, back in the Cold War days, we had the giant Red Army, and we had to show the Red Army that we were there and we were on the border and we were going to get them if they came across the border. And now that we've gone into more asymmetrical type conflict, the war on terrorism is more of an asymmetrical type conflict, you don't necessarily need the vast amounts of forward deployed forces. So we can draw down the forward deployed forces as well. Thanks. But absolutely, you know, in the spending that we're in right now is first of all, we've layered on top of all of these obligations that we have in entitlements, we've layered on top of that bailouts, we've layered on top of that buying car companies, bailing out insurance companies, and then stimulus. And so discretionary spending is through the roof as well. And we can start there. We need to draw that down. Then we need to have a serious consideration or a serious conversation about Social Security and what we're going to do with Social Security, how we're going to deal with that going forward. Because right now it's unsustainable. And if we look out and we project where Social Security will be, basically for those of you who haven't retired yet, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. The people who are working are paying for the people who are retired. There is no Social Security trust fund, per se. Your money doesn't go into a big bank and then come out when you retire. You're hoping that there'll be enough young people working to be able to pay your Social Security when you retire. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a classic Ponzi scheme. That's a textbook definition. And so, you know, during the 80s, Reagan had a commission where it was a bipartisan commission to come up with specific recommendations, and it's credited with having extended the Ponzi scheme somewhat. And I think that we need to definitely look toward that in the future. We need to find a way to be able to make that program sustainable. And there's a lot of what they call third rails in politics when you talk about those issues. But if we don't grapple with them now, there isn't going to be any Social Security in the future. So it's something that we absolutely need to get a handle on. Regards the other entitlement programs, I think we need a path for people to get back into back to become productive members of society. And the way we do that is we grow our economy. And I've always said that the best welfare program is a good job that pays a good wage. The will to change virtually anything. You know, we can go back and we can revisit all of these agreements. We can. I know one of your passions is always talking about global warming. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't call it global warming anymore. We got to call it climate change. Again, to your thing about the words. And one of the things that we've seen recently with the University of East Anglia and the IPCC, we've seen that in many cases, the data that's basing all of these climate change bills that they're based on, the books have been cooked. You know, we're finding out that in 1995, there's been no appreciable global warming since 1995. Well, one of the things I remember was Barack Obama's victory speech when he said, "We'll look back on this as the day the seas stopped rising." Well, he's right. The sea's not rising. So we will look back on this as the day that we were able to find out what the heck was going on with this. And you know, the hacked emails, the cookbooks, I think that almost every decision that's been made in government based on that data needs to be totally revisited. And that includes the regional greenhouse gas initiative here in the state of Ohio. Revisited in light of new data, and then we should withdraw from Reggie, in my opinion. Thank you very much. You know, Rhode Island was founded based on religious freedom. And I think that we need to understand that there is a differentiation between certainly the Muslim faith and radical Islam. And we need to also recognize that we are in a war with radical Islam, with jihadists. And we have to stop treating this like a criminal matter. And I think what happens frequently is that we're trying to treat this like a law enforcement issue. And it's not. We're at war with these people. They are bent on our total destruction. Regards to your other comments about the congressman being sworn in, I agree with Mark. You know, if they're Americans and they've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and that's their religious faith that they use to affirm that, they're okay with me. And that's fine, because that's what we need, is we need to make sure that they stay true to that oath to uphold and defend and support the Constitution of the United States.